What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so continuing our discussions on Blackest Night, at this point we pick up with the second part, and this focuses partly on the Green Lantern Corps and the second half on the Green Lantern title itself, again, much like we did in the previous video. Now, in the last video, we had basically dealt with this idea that there were two things happening in the universe at the same time. I mean, the Black Lantern rings are basically these rings that attach themselves to those who have been deceased, and they resurrect them for the purpose of emotionally charging other individuals so that when those individuals' hearts are just filled with all different types of emotions, the Black Lantern takes their heart, consumes it, and it feeds their central power battery, charging it up to 100%. Now, the idea here is that in the last video, we basically mentioned that the Black Lantern rings basically spreading throughout the universe was a massive calamity, because what it meant is that individuals who had died across the universe were being resurrected, no matter what planet they were on, and we even saw entire planets being resurrected by the Black Lantern rings. Now, of course, all this goes towards the entity of Necron, which is to say, in the DC universe, when it comes to the emotional spectrum, you've got entities that represent those spectrums. They're not really gods, they're really more just kind of like avatars. And so Necron is kind of this living embodiment of death, so to speak. But the idea here is that the goal of the Black Lanterns is to basically charge the central power battery to 100% so that it will basically open a gateway and allow Necron to enter the living realm. And all of this is important because of the fact that this feeds into the War of Light. It feeds into the rise of the Black Lanterns. All these Lantern Corps going to war against one another. While that's happening, the Black Lanterns rising to prominence, ultimately eliminating all life in existence, and then ushering in this basically Blackest Night, this eternal darkness in the universe. And so with the Green Lantern Corps, this again focuses on basically everybody except for Hal Jordan, the main Green Lantern, quote unquote, in the DC universe. And so we basically end up picking up with like Saronic Natu and these characters. And we had talked about how the Black Lanterns were really sadistic because they would basically kill anybody. In this instance, it was the Black Lanterns going to the infirmary of the Green Lantern Corps, and then with those individuals who were effectively injured or who were basically unable to defend themselves, the Black Lanterns would terrify them, and when their hearts were charged, they would just seize them and take their hearts out of their bodies. So they were basically killing helpless people. So it's pretty insane in terms of how that unfolds. But again, that becomes significant because it's like classic zombie infection. The more zombies there are, the more zombies there become. Just because the Black Lanterns, once they kill someone, a Black Lantern ring suddenly bonds to that person, and the numbers bolster even further. And so that's what this is. This is a continuation of the idea that the Green Lantern Corps is basically coming to the realization that the dead are rising in the form of Black Lanterns, and the goal is to get as many people out there as they possibly can. The problem with this is that each individual member, or at least the most prominent members of the Green Lanterns, are dealing with the Black Lanterns in their own individual way. Now, this is something that happens across the board. For Saronic Natu, she's basically the top medic, the top doctor of the Green Lantern Corps. And so to see individuals being killed and then turned into Black Lanterns is her own way of basically having to deal with it, being confronted by the Black Lantern concept. Now, this means that the Black Lanterns themselves will fill her heart with emotion, with rage, with fear, with willpower, so on and so forth, and they'll try to take her out as well. But what had happened over the course of the Green Lantern Corps line of stories by Peter Tomasi is he began focusing on this idea that a kind of affection was brewing between Saronic Natu and Kyle Rayner as a Green Lantern. Now, in all honesty, this just made good sense. It's basically this idea that a lot of the girlfriends of Kyle Rayner were like, you know, heroic, or they were very virtuous, but with Saronic Natu, she basically possesses all those character traits. She's headstrong, she's brave, she's got the drive where it counts, she's got ambition. Her goal is to be one of the greatest Green Lanterns. And so it was basically Peter J. Tomasi coming along and saying, we're going to introduce a love interest between Kyle Rayner and Saronic Natu, but she's not going to go out the same way as everybody else. The cool thing about this is that with Kyle Rayner's most recent girlfriend, a girl by the name of Jade, who was basically the daughter of the Green Lantern Alan Scott, what happened is that she had essentially sacrificed her life in order to save Kyle Rayner, also imbued him with something called the Star Heart, which is basically a version of the Green Lantern energy from a different reality. And the idea here was that it helped to bolster the powers of Kyle Rayner, went towards him being Ion. We talked about that in a previous video. But the long and short of this is that Jade had basically been resurrected by a Black Lantern ring. And much like all the Black Lanterns that we've seen so far, the goal is emotional manipulation. Feed on their emotional state, whatever relationship they have, charge their hearts with energy, and then take their heart when it's filled with emotion. Jade had initially appeared to Kyle Rayner Raynor as, hey, it's okay that I pass, that's the way things go, but we can be together again. And this kind of hope, this Blue Lantern energy of hope filled Kyle Rayner. It was also willpower. It was also the belief that maybe things can work out, but it was really Kyle Rayner putting on a ruse, that he was playing along with Jade to understand the motivations of what the Black Lanterns were looking for. And that's when Kyle Rayner came to the realization the Black Lanterns are looking to charge people's hearts with emotion and then consume them. Now, in the middle of all this, because Jade had such an emotional and psychological impact on Kyle Rayner, it takes the intervention of Saronic Natu to sort of snap Kyle Rayner out completely, in the sense that he's aware of what it is that Jade's doing, but his heart can't help but feel that maybe they can be together again. Now, of course, again, Saronic Natu has no stake in Jade. She doesn't know Jade. She's never met Jade. And so Saronic Natu is the voice of reason here. She's the one that essentially kind of defies it all and jumps into the fray. Now, the other half of this are characters like Kilowog, right? For Kilowog, he doesn't really have a whole lot of emotional attachments to other people that are out there. For him, he's the drill sergeant of the Green Lantern Corps. He's very militaristic in that fashion. And so for him, it's honor and duty above all else. But as the drill sergeant for the Green Lantern, every single Green Lantern that dies feels like it's the fault of Kilowog. And that's what the Black Lanterns feed on in his case. It's this idea, all these different Black Lanterns out here that were formerly Green Lanterns who died in the line of duty, they wouldn't have died if you'd done your job like you were supposed to. And that's what fills him with rage. Because remember, no matter what any of these Green Lantern Corps members feel, the Black Lanterns will feed on it. But one of the darkest moments comes from out of this when we basically find out that the children of Crib have all come back as Black Lanterns. Now, Crib was a character who was, I believe, originally introduced in the Sinestro Corps War. But Crib was basically this weird alien entity that essentially went on this pattern of killing Green Lanterns and then taking their children and making the children her own. Now, she wasn't like abusing them or anything. She would just take them, whisk them off to some planet somewhere and say, you are now my children. But the idea is that for whatever reason that hasn't been explained yet, these kids have all basically died. Now, this can largely be due to be attributed to the fact that Crib was the only one taking care of these kids. And with Crib basically having been captured by the Green Lanterns and then allowed to go with the Zamorons, the Star Sapphires, these kids were just kind of left to their own devices and ultimately ended up just perishing according to the environment. But the problem is that in the middle of all this, we end up having the arrival of one of the Indigo Lanterns. Now again, when it comes to the Black Lanterns, the only way to truly defeat them is to blast them with just a massive amount of just bright energy, basically white light. And the way in which you can pull that off is by combining rings together or something along those lines. By blasting them with a massive amount of light energy, what it does is it creates a feedback in the ring, basically causes the ring to essentially overload. And the result is that this feedback resonates throughout the Black Lantern themselves and they simply just explode. But what this does, with the arrival of these kids, with the arrival of the Indigo tribe showing up and basically helping the Green Lanterns to stave off the Black Lantern Corps, we switch our focus to the Red Lanterns. Now again, we talked about this in the last video in the sense that the Red Lanterns were basically dealing with the aftermath of the Green Lanterns trying to retrieve one of their own who had previously perished. And in the middle of this whole conflict, with the Green Lanterns being the only ones really left there, the Black Lantern rings started descending on everybody. And what happens is 4 of the 5 inversions are basically resurrected. Now, the 5th inversion is Atrocitus himself, the person who created the Red Lantern Corps. But to provide a little bit of history, for those of you guys who are watching this video for the first time, the first thing I would suggest is checking out the origin of the Red Lanterns. That way you'll fully understand who the 5 inversions are. But the long and short of this is that before the Green Lanterns were ever created by the Guardians of the Universe had created the Manhunters. And the Manhunters are basically just robots. And the belief of the Guardians is that because the robots only do what they're told, they're the perfect form to basically police the universe, to make sure that there's no credible threats with regards to people trying to obliterate planets or anything along those lines. The problem is that the Manhunters malfunction, and we'll actually find out later on down the line that it was one of the Guardians themselves that caused it to happen. But the idea is that with the Manhunters basically going awry, they traveled to Sector 666 and basically killed everyone. And so what ended up happening is the survivors of Sector 666, these 5 inversions, came together in their hatred for the Guardians of the Universe and began the process of plotting and trying to find a way to eliminate the Guardians in their entirety, along with the newly formed Green Lantern Corps. And so where Atrocitus was one of the 5 inversions and had basically seen a vision of the future with regards to what's actually happening right now, what he in turn did is killed the other 4 inversions and then created the Red Lantern Corps. And so that's why these inversions are resurrecting, is because these are the people that Atrocitus killed. And so in this instance, with the 4 inversions popping up as Black Lanterns, Atrocitus is fearless and doesn't care because he's so full with rage, because rage is is the one governing force of his life, his heart was already charged with full emotion. But the caveat to this, and remember, when it comes to the Red Lanterns, when they're given a Red Lantern ring, it replaces their heart. And so where the Black Lanterns attack Atrocitus for the purpose of taking his heart and consuming it, his heart will inevitably regrow. Now, this has both a benefit and a drawback. The benefit is that they can't kill Atrocitus by tearing his heart out, which means the Red Lanterns cannot be killed by the Black Lanterns, and the Red Lanterns themselves cannot become Black Lanterns, unless of course the ring is taken away. The drawback to this is they are basically an infinite source of emotion. As long as they keep like Red Lanterns prisoner, Black Lanterns could literally just repeatedly tear out their hearts and consume them until they charge the central power battery. That's why this threat of the Black Lanterns has to be dealt with as fast as humanly possible. But in this instance, because Atrocitus is basically the living embodiment of rage, the Black Lanterns don't stand a chance. You know, him blasting them with massive amounts of energy and so on and so forth, again, causes these Black Lanterns to come crashing down. And so what this does is basically transition to this third part of the story, this last little bit where we basically pick up with Hal Jordan the Green Lantern, we pick up with Sinestro, and we pick up with the Indigo Tribe as well as the Star Sapphire. This comes out of the idea that with Sinestro having been imprisoned by the Green Lanterns after the event of the Sinestro Corps War, it allowed a villain by the name of Mongol, one of the most notable enemies in DC and someone who's basically equal to Superman in strength in a lot of ways, to rise to power after receiving a Yellow Lantern ring and then basically take over the Sinestro Corps himself. And so what this did is once Thal Sinestro was freed from his imprisonment in the midst of the rise of the Black Lanterns, he went out, he basically tried to seize back control of his Sinestro Corps, and the first stop was Zamaron, the home of the Star Sapphires, because the Star Sapphires had taken a number of the Sinestro Corps and tried to convert them into Star Sapphires. And so because of that, Sinestro arriving is also met with the Indigo Tribe, you know, Indigo One, who had basically snatched Hal Jordan from Earth, brought him over to Zamaron in an effort to basically start uniting the different corps. And again, that's the basis of the Indigo Tribe. The Indigo Tribe is the Lantern Corps of compassion, but they're also the Lantern Corps of reason and logic. And so this basically puts us where we are right now with regards to a little bit of infighting, in the sense that we have Hal Jordan and Sinestro bickering among one another, but it's basically this idea that we have to begin working together. We have to function as a cohesive unit, because if we don't, this War of Light will consume us all, and the Black Lanterns will just bring about the end of all things in the universe. So ultimately what this does is, again, this picks up a little bit with regards to the Blue Lanterns and the Orange Lanterns. Remember, the Orange Lanterns are basically the Lantern Corps of greed, of avarice, but instead of having an actual core, it's basically just Larfleeze himself, in the sense that his core consists of constructs. But the Blue Lanterns are basically a Lantern Corps based on hope. It's the idea that no matter how bad things get, there's always a way to overcome things. And so the power of the Blue Lanterns can only really stand some measure when it's accompanied by the powers of the Green Lanterns. The Green Lanterns are kind of the foundation that powers the Blue Lantern Corps. And that's why in this instance, despite the fact that the Blue Lanterns are largely considered to be the most powerful, they're really struggling against the Orange Lanterns because there's no Green Lanterns there to bolster their own power. But this changes when Indigo One brings Hal Jordan and Sinestro and Star Sapphire directly to where it is the Blue Lanterns are at, because again, the Green Lanterns bolster the Blue Lantern power, and the Blue Lantern rings can supercharge the Green Lantern rings. So they're designed to basically work together. But this allows the Blue Lanterns the power they need facing against Larfleeze. The problem is that in the middle of all this, all the orange constructs vanish. And the reason for this is because Larfleeze recalled them all to himself, because of the fact that, again, the Black Lantern rings descended on Larfleeze's base of operations and began bonding themselves to all these people Larfleeze had killed in his greed and in his hubris. And so with this in mind, the Larfleeze basically begins to panic and basically begins to run off, but is met by the arrival of Atrocitus, who basically shows up having defeated all four inversions and the Black Lanterns on his own home planet, with the intention of not only seizing the Orange Lantern ring for himself, but using it with his own abilities, because what it would do is it would bolster the power of the Red Lanterns in terms of the fact that he's able to use two different rings at the same time. So again, Atrocitus's motivation is to still take out all the different Lantern Corps to basically ensure that the Guardians of the Universe are defeated and so on and so forth. He's not yet been recruited to the cause of all the other Lanterns. He's not yet been told, here's everything that's going on. He's aware of the prophecy of Blackest Night. He's aware of what it means, but he doesn't really seem to grasp the idea that if the prophecy of Blackest Night rises to its full fruition, everybody will die, including him and the Red Lanterns themselves. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.